Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Thompson, and I help to manage the cloud optimization practice here at Continental Resources. I really appreciate you taking the time this morning. For those of you who aren't familiar with us or haven't worked with us before, Continental Resources is a global IT solutions and services value-added reseller. We've been around since 1962, and our focus is on four key areas: data center, networking, security, and cloud. We bridge the gap between the vendors we work with and customer by being flexible, nimble, and creative. This webinar this morning is focusing on the public cloud, optimizing AWS and Azure. In many companies, groups outside of IT spin up cloud instances on their own, putting the bills on the credit cards. A tiny fraction of companies are able to buy direct from Amazon via traditional billing, but credit cards are almost always used. They're the norm. This leads to governance and visibility problems. By not centralizing things, there's no IT oversight, no input from the security team, and essentially no financial controls. The result of this is sprawling AWS workloads and that are not optimized for right size, so companies are spending far more than they need to. Even in situations where companies have managed to control deployments, it's not simple to do it at the lowest price or to know with certainty that things are secure. This webinar will focus on our solution to this problem. It analyzes AWS and Azure usage, identifies waste and security issues, and helps you to resolve them. Spend can be reduced by up to 30%. A larger company was able to save $2 million over the course of a year by using our tool. Now, they obviously use a lot of Amazon if they can pull that off, and not everyone does. But we found that once companies migrate parts of their infrastructure and workloads to the cloud, they tend to use more and more services as time progresses. It's critical to optimize how the cloud is deployed early on. What I'd like to do is introduce Dan Vitucci, our Chief Cloud Technologist. He's going to go over our cloud practice and start talking about our solution. Dan? Next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Dave. I want to thank everybody for joining the call today. I'll just do a quick introduction. So my name is Dan Vitucci, and I run the cloud practice here at Continental Resources. I've got about 13 years experience in infrastructure operations, as well as I've been at ConRes for the last 5 years, specifically in the last 3 years focused around helping customers leverage cloud. The cloud practice that we have today, it really is focused in kind of three pillars. We call them migrate, automate, and optimize. Migrate is really for customers that are, have never previously used the public cloud, and they're trying to understand where using the public cloud makes sense, taking a look at their applications and their infrastructure that they have today, and trying to understand how much it's going to cost to move to the public cloud, what makes sense to move it, why would I move it, what are the business reasons, so we can help a customer understand all that. Once we kind of figure out which applications are going to the cloud, then what we do is we can help them build a public cloud, hybrid cloud architecture that is going to fit the requirements for these applications that would be moving to the public cloud. So we build out the architecture, we design everything, and every customer is a little different. So, we're able to kind of customize it for the customer's needs for their specific application. And then the next area is we help customers with kind of early on areas that we find for moving to the cloud, which include backup and disaster recovery. So, we help customers, for example, migrate off of using tape for archive, and depending on what application they're backup application they're using, we can help them with migrating that archive to a public cloud to get off the tape. Same thing with disaster recovery. Many customers, they at least want to get out of the business of not running a disaster recovery site any longer. So we can help them with a plan and execute to help them get out of that DR site and set up a DR site in the public cloud, and work with all the tools like Zerto, Cloud Endure that can help make all this happen. So The key with that is, again, it requires someone that not only has experience in the public cloud, but you need to have a lot of experience in, private clouds and networking, and to understand how that environment is going to stretch to a public cloud. The next area is around automation, and really this is no matter where you are, right? Public cloud, private cloud. So we focus on a tool called Ansible from Red Hat, which is, a very highly downloaded open source tool that Red Hat bought a couple years ago. And the great thing about Ansible is, number one, it's got wide scale industry adoption with all the manufacturers. So whether it's Cisco, VMware, Microsoft, it doesn't matter. You can use Ansible to automate the end-to-end infrastructure, whether you're in Amazon, whether you're on-premise in a VMware environment. So we can help you automate your environment, which is many of the reasons why people go to public cloud in the first place, is they see that, it allows you to be more agile, move faster, do automation orchestration. Well, you don't necessarily need to go to the public cloud to do that. We can show you how to make that happen in your hybrid cloud environment. And then the last area, which is going to be where we're going to be focused today on this call, is around optimization. And this is really for customers that are, once you're in the public cloud, the game completely changes from when you have previously, say, for example, managed an on-premise VMware environment. Because now you have to be really focused on, how efficiently you're using that public cloud, to make sure that the instances are right sized, to make sure that you're using all the storage that you provisioned. Many customers say that the public cloud is expensive, and it makes no sense. It's expensive if you don't properly, optimize it and monitor it on a daily basis. The other area that we'll talk about today is around security and compliance. So, many customers, they start to use public cloud, and the IT administrators, they've never previously used it before. So you may have a lot of folks within an organization deploying resources in a public cloud, and very quickly you can run into just simple best practice issues that are not followed. For example, like having a read-only S3 bucket with public visibility, that you could be sharing data out to people that you don't want to share data to. Those are very common issues that can happen when you start to use public cloud. So the tool we're going to talk about today, called Cloud Checker, really helps to kind of help you police this environment and make sure that, from a security and compliance standpoint, no one's doing anything that would potentially have any impact on the company. So I'm going to turn it over to Tyler, who is going to walk you through a demo of Cloud Checker and show some of the ways that it would be leveraged in a public cloud. So go ahead, Tyler.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan, and thanks, Dave, for that introduction. Give me just a second here, guys, and I'm going to share my screen. All right, and if Dan or Rachel, if you could confirm everyone can see my screen, the Cloud Checker tool.
Yeah, it looks good.
All right, perfect. So as Dan explained, kind of on the optimization side, when you deploy workloads in public cloud, and everything we show you on this side of the demo is going to be focused around AWS. But Cloud Checker is a tool that Continental Resources leverages that is cloud agnostic. So it covers AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. But when you're working with public cloud environments, it can really become difficult to, one, track your spend. Now that you have servers and infrastructure that's billing by the minute and by the hour within your environment, it can be difficult to see what you can do within that infrastructure to optimize it to meet business outcomes and reduce the cost to the point where you're only paying for what you need, rather than building servers like you would on an on-premise schedule where you just purchase equipment. set it up, run your application. The benefit of moving to the cloud is that you can control it hourly. Cloud Checker is essentially a tool that's going to help you optimize and control that infrastructure within your AWS environment. The other side of AWS that can become difficult to manage is around governance and security, right? So when you set up equipment in AWS, infrastructure in AWS, you're creating servers, security groups, VPCs, all these different components. You're doing it at the click of a button, and you can create an account at the click of a button. So it becomes very easy to just deploy infrastructure, which can be very hard to scale and track as you grow. Essentially, Cloud Checker is a cloud management platform, and the easiest way to think of it is like a read-only engineer. It's tied into every single report that you're generating out of AWS. So things like CloudTrail, CloudWatch, your AWS config, your VPC flow logs. These are all reports and logs that AWS is producing on who's clicking what within your portal and what's being deployed, what's being created. Cloud Checker essentially sources all of that information. It monitors it on an hourly basis, and it gives you an actionable insight that lets you know where you need to look to either reduce a security risk, assure a corporate governance policy, or reduce your cost in AWS. This is kind of the initial screen you'll see when you log into an account. And just so you guys know, this sample account that I'm going through for the demo today is what it would look like if you were looking at your AWS infrastructure that's spread across multiple accounts. So this specific account I show here is actually covering 9 separate accounts within AWS. Essentially, it's giving me an overview of best practices across all 9 of these accounts. It allows me to pull cost reporting, cost management across all of these accounts, and it gives me that actionable insight, letting me know where I need to look immediately to reduce that security risk or save cost. All of that's going to filter through on this best practice screen. It's going to house all of my actionable insights, and I can dive deeper into the tool for more granular reporting. So I'll show you just kind of an example we'll go through on the security side. And obviously at the end of this, we'll leave it open to questions so that anyone who wants to see a specific report or wants to know if Cloud Checker will monitor some aspect of their infrastructure can ask that question. I can show you it within the tool. So from this view, I can pull information on specific security incidents. So let's take this one, for example. One of my 9 accounts, someone has spun up a security group here in US East region, and they've left port 22 open. So I know it's in Northern Virginia. I see that there's an instance in this group. It could be an FTP server that we've spun up, but I've left port 22 open. First thing I want to do is I want to know why this is an issue in AWS. Cloud Checker is always going to give me this read more option. It's going to let me know, hey, why is this a compliance issue or a security issue within AWS? Why is it posing a risk within my environment? And then it's going to give me a link to documentation to help me resolve that issue. I can pull more detailed reporting on it. So if I click into this security group, Cloud Checker will actually show me the public and private facing IP addresses. It'll let me know things like who spun it up, what IAM user created it, when it was created, what IP addresses are connecting to it. All of that information that's housed in different reports in AWS, Cloud Checker is essentially simplifying that for me so that I can see what I need to look at and have reporting that I can audit and export directly out of the tool. Gives me a 30-day trend so I can review with engineers how often this has been an error across our AWS accounts. And ultimately, I can use this tool as a benchmark or an auditing tool for compliance standards at my company. If I go into this secure configuration, I have a CIS benchmark built into here. So this is a Center for Internet Security benchmark that essentially lets me know, based on my type of account, what areas do I need to make sure I'm meeting compliancy for, and am I meeting it correctly right now? So this is something you can have sent to you on like a weekly or monthly basis to review with your engineers to make sure your account, one, meets AWS best practice, and then if there's specific compliance standards. So if you're hosted in government infrastructure, you're gonna have different checks on this benchmark that you have to make sure you meet to make sure your account is up to GovCloud standard, right? Cloud Checker covers the majority of checks within government infrastructure, commercial infrastructure. It's actually, out of the cost optimization tools and security tools on the market, it is the only one that holds a security competency with AWS. So Cloud Checker holds a security and a government competency with AWS, and they provide the most controls when we look at like a regulatory product mapping tool around compliance standard. So it covers controls around everything in IAM for PCI compliance. It covers controls for Allgress, FINRA, FedRAMP, GDPR, whatever you're looking to make sure your company is compliant in when hosting in the cloud. Cloud Checker is essentially going to give you actionable insights to make sure you're meeting that compliancy day in and day out, and provide you with a warehouse of auditing and reporting so that you can submit for whatever you need. This report here will break down specific issues. So if I go into that issue around networking, Part of my compliance standard is that I ensure no security groups allow traffic from 0 to port 22. I see that exact issue I just showed you guys here. So when I export this, I can make sure engineers are reviewing things from a security perspective on our account. So that's kind of the security side of the best practice module. The other piece I'll show you around security will have to do around alerting, right? So CloudCheckr does a really good job of simplifying your reporting, making it easy for decision makers and people that work more on the business side of AWS to understand what's happening in your environment and make recommendations to your technical team. But at the same time, it can be difficult to have an employee staff to just look at CloudCheckr all day or go through this reporting on a daily basis. Within each of the modules that we'll go through in this demo, security, utilization, inventory, and cost, there's an alerting function. So any of these issues that I find within the tool, whether it's a cost savings check that I'll get into later or a security check, I have an opportunity to create an alert to export it out to me so that whatever communication path you guys use at your company, you can leverage to make sure CloudCheckr alerts you when things are happening within your AWS environment that don't meet those rule sets and those compliance standards. So from right within here, I can use built-in alerts so I can make sure that out of those 550 best practice checks that this tool is doing, I'm grabbing exactly what I need around my account. I can create custom alerts. Custom alerts can be sent to me over SNS topics, syslog, Slack, really whatever communication platform, even if it's email that you want to get these alerts out, you can set that up within CloudCheckr so that you're always having alerts on what's pertinent to you from a security or cost perspective. So that's the security side of the tool. Essentially what it's monitoring there are your changelog in AWS, your AWS config, and CloudTrail. The other piece of what this tool is going to focus around is cost, availability, and usage. And it works in a very similar way to security. It's monitoring everything that's happening in your AWS environment. The only difference with the cost and usage checks is it's monitoring different reports. So on our cost side, we're going to look at CloudWatch. CloudCheckr is going to monitor those metrics and make recommendations based on utilization. It's going to look at your inventory through AWS config. And ultimately, it's going to look at your cost and usage report or your detailed billing report that you get from Amazon Web Services. It's essentially going to cross all of those three reports together for you across all of your accounts. And if it finds an area where utilization is causing an increase in cost, you can see from here that you have a breakdown of areas where you can save money. So it's essentially going to make a recommendation on changing a certain instance size or changing a type of infrastructure you have in your AWS environment to reduce the costs coming in on your current bill. And this is done on an hourly basis. So here it generates for me all of these different checks around cost within CloudCheckr. And from here, it's ultimately going to bubble them up into what's called the savings screen. So from the savings screen, it's going to attach a dollar amount value to what I can save in AWS by making a specific change within my infrastructure. If you look here across these 9 accounts, if I were to follow all the checks that CloudCheckr has today, I would save $4,300 a month on my invoices. Those checks are going to come in a few different ways. So they're going to show you your idle resources. These are machines that have relatively low CPU consumption or network or memory consumption in your environment. They're doing something in AWS, but the server that I sized for my application when I migrated it off of our on-premise infrastructure is just way too large for what I'm looking to do. And CloudCheckr is recommending I spin it down to a smaller instance to save myself on my monthly cost. From here, I can essentially go into the detailed reporting. So just like I showed you guys around security, I have heat map reports within CloudCheckr that will monitor my CPU consumption on an hourly basis or a daily basis so that I can track what processors are moving at and why CloudCheckr made that recommendation that I take that server and I make it smaller. I can see my average and my peak usage. It's also going to simplify that heat map report and those CloudWatch metrics into a very easy to read and digestible right sizing report. That's going to let me know, okay, essentially here's the servers I have in my environment. Here's what I'm currently paying. Here's what I should be paying for that instance. There's my savings amount. Here's the actual sizing I'm going to change. So in this situation for my Kubernetes cluster, I'm going from an M3 medium down to a T2 medium. Shows me my average CPU, my network, and my peak CPU consumption on this server. So I know I'm making the right recommendation and I can size this into a smaller machine and save myself 2 cents an hour on my cost or save myself a good amount over the course of a month. From within here, I can actually do automation as well. So when I first explained the tool, think of it like a read-only user. That's how it's grabbing all these metrics and making these recommendations. But out of the box, CloudCheckr will also allow you to automate. So if you give it the correct access into your AWS environment, you can even allow this tool to use pre-written scripts, things like Lambda and server sizing scripts within CloudCheckr to size your infrastructure for you. So there's 550 best practice checks in this tool that CloudCheckr is monitoring from a security and a cost perspective. Out of those, there's 450 pre-written scripts within this tool that I can use to automate the sizing of my infrastructure. I don't even have to have engineers manually size these instances. Last thing I'll show you guys on the savings tab is going to be around the ability to clean up waste. So as you grow your AWS environment and you start to branch out to multiple accounts like I have here, I've got 9 different accounts. They're owned by different business units at the company. We have infrastructure across all 9 of them that is being controlled by different individuals or teams within IT. It can be difficult to manage what's happening and what's changing across my infrastructure on a weekly or a monthly basis. CloudCheckr is monitoring all of that. So if I have a user that no longer works for the company and we're still paying for a workspace, it's going to let me know immediately. It's also going to break down all of those ancillary services that wrap around compute in AWS. So you create a server in AWS, you have to attach storage, you have to attach networking components like IP addresses. Sometimes you're going to add load balancers into your website hosting servers. CloudCheckr is going to monitor all of those little components underneath your EC2, and it's going to let you know if there's an opportunity to reduce waste by eliminating some of those components that you don't need for the way your business is structured. It'll populate them here. I can see information on who spun them up, when they were created, how long it's been since they've connected, and essentially make sure my environment is always built out so that I'm only paying for what I need in AWS. The other side of this tool is really going to work around migrating those previous gen resources, which can be a huge recommendation if you're in AWS right now and you don't have somebody who's constantly working with your AWS resource or monitoring that AWS calculator to see where there's better savings based on economies of scale. CloudCheckr is going to do all that for you. So in this situation, I have a T1 micro server. This is older gen hardware on AWS. CloudCheckr is recommending I move this to a newer generation server. AWS has a lower price on this newer generation hardware that's actually faster than what I'm consuming right now. So CloudCheckr is going to find all of those recommendations within the tool. It's going to look at your on-demand infrastructure, and it can show you cost savings just by migrating from some instances to newer generation hardware within AWS, where you're going to get a pricing discount. Last piece it's going to do is help you with reserved instance recommendations. So as you grow your AWS infrastructure, as you're building more applications, CloudCheckr is going to get a better idea of your historical consumption. It's going to understand what your utilization is on AWS, and it's going to let you know where there are workloads that you have that are safe traffic to take out a reserved instance. A reserved instance from Amazon is going to cut you anywhere between a 30 and a 60% discount on your compute. And CloudCheckr is going to help you make the recommendation on which one to lock into a contract on with AWS and what commitment type to take it out on so you can make the most value for your dollar and make the maximum amount of account savings that you can get on AWS. That's really everything I wanted to show you guys in terms of how this tool can help you save on AWS and also how the tool can help you secure your workloads on AWS. Really, the rest of this tool is going to be used as a cost reporting tool. So from here, you'll get a breakdown of your AWS billing. You can track your consumption day in and day out. Give this to finance users. You can create custom dashboards for individuals and have a better understanding than you would get in Cost Explorer of what's happening with your AWS spend and how you can make sure you're meeting budget amounts for the month. With that, I'm going to pause for a second and just have anyone who has questions right now while I've got the tool open. We can go through and kind of see specific reports or answer anything you have. If you want to just type them in that chat window, and then I'll have Rachel relay them over to me and I can go through any questions that you guys have. And I'll give it a minute here so everyone can type the questions out. We'll try to get through all the ones we can. Rachel, did you have any come over?
Yeah, we have a few. So here's the first one. How do I set up a CloudCheckr POC for my AWS accounts?
Gotcha. So you may have heard Dave mention at the beginning of the call, this tool is an ongoing management tool, but if you have existing consumption in AWS, we can leverage this for a POC to see your environment and see the value you would get by moving your AWS billing underneath Continental Resources. This is a tool that Continental Resources provides free of cost to customers to leverage to manage their AWS infrastructure. In order to set up a POC, it's relatively easy. So all you would have to do is reach out to your Continental Resources account manager and the cloud team at Continental Resources. Let them know what you currently have in AWS, what your accounts are in AWS, and we can get you set up with the proof of concept. Connect this tool to your environment, and start to monitor what you have for a 14-day trial period. At the end, we'll review with you and see what you have in terms of savings, security recommendations, how you can better meet compliance, how you can better save money on AWS.
Okay. Next question is, how quickly will I see results once CloudCheckr is collecting information on my AWS accounts?
Really good question. So when I walk through this savings screen here, you'll see the checks around idle resources, unused, previous gen. Obviously, these take time to populate, right? These idle resource checks are grabbing average information on your compute, your processors, your RAM, all that information in your environment. Usually, these checks will start to appear within 7 days. Realistically, my recommendation is to wait to at least a 14-day period so that CloudCheckr can find what the peak values are in your consumption. On those database servers where you're only running reports on like a monthly basis on the infrastructure, let CloudCheckr monitor it for a 30-day period and grab you those average and peak CPU statistics before you start to pull the recommendations.
Great. Next question is, what is the average cost savings identified for any organization with CloudCheckr?
So the average cost savings, and if you guys head over to the CloudCheckr website, there's a ton of case studies and white papers where you can read this from really any scale of customer, whether it's a small, medium business that's leveraging the tool for management to an enterprise customer like NASA. You can read a case study on how they found savings, how they better secured their environment. On average, a customer saves 30% leveraging this tool to monitor their AWS consumption.
Great. Next question is, what areas do you typically see the most opportunity for cost savings?
Okay. Realistically, the checks around idle resources and reserve purchase recommendations are historically where you're going to see the most cost savings, right? RIs are going to give you the largest discount from AWS. The idle workloads, being able to make sure that on-demand infrastructure, that clusters of information you're monitoring within the tool have savings checks is important as well. What I'm seeing a ton of savings around right now is around previous generation resources. I just worked with a customer going back probably 2.5 weeks ago that came off a reserve instance purchase that they had over the past 3 years. The infrastructure went back to on-demand. We analyzed it with CloudCheckr, and it turned out there's about 35 to 40 instances on their account that were on previous gen infrastructure when they made the reservation. Moving that infrastructure over, and that's only 35 to 40 servers. So a lot of you guys probably have AWS accounts with that amount of infrastructure. That move saved the customer almost $100,000 yearly just to move that infrastructure to newer gen. And then once we reserve it, we're going to see a 30 to 60% discount on top of that. So there's a lot of savings right now in previous gen, just because there's so many newer generation hardware being deployed in US East and US West on AWS. There's M5 servers now that you can move from your M4 infrastructure, C5, R4, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, good. Just a few more questions. The next one is there a limit to the number of accounts CloudCheckr can handle?
There's no limit on account. So in the view you see here, I have it set up to monitor 9 at the same time. You can set it up to monitor as many as you want. You can also group them. So if you have like 10 accounts that are strictly for sandbox and dev test accounts for engineers, you probably have different security rules that you're going to apply rather than your production environment. So you can essentially group them however you want. There's no limit to accounts. There's no limit to how many groups you can create, but there is a little bit of setup you'll want to do at the beginning to make sure that you're monitoring exactly what you need.
Okay. And the last question is, what services and applications do you see the largest area of improvement to reconfigure for efficiency?
Really good question. Obviously, it's a little bit different depending on what customer we're looking at, kind of what is deployed on the environment. Obviously, EC2 tends to be the easiest, right? You have on-demand EC2, that's the compute consumption. That's what's making up the majority of most invoices, especially with lift and shift infrastructure. So EC2 tends to be the easiest area to find savings in the beginning. But if you're a customer that leverages the actual platform services on AWS, so you're leveraging RDS or you're leveraging Redshift, all of those services within AWS that are part of that platform, DynamoDB, Elasticache, they're monitored in CloudCheckr as well. So if you have those running on on-demand compute or even on reserved instances, reserved nodes within AWS, you're going to find savings on those as well. It really depends on what your environment's built out. I see majority of EC2 just because that's what the majority of consumption is on AWS. I think it's something like 86% of workloads on Amazon are in EC2. But if you're a customer that leverages those other platform services and that's majority of your consumption, you're going to get the same value out of using CloudCheckr as any other customer that's leveraging it for EC2. And was that all of them, Rachel, or did any more come through?
Yes. No, that's it.
Perfect. All right, then I will kick it back to Dave and Dan just to go through kind of the closing remarks and a little bit more info on the POC.
Thank you,
Thanks, Tyler. So CloudCheckr is pretty impressive. It takes a look with best practice checks at cost, security, usage, and visibility. What we want to do is to make it easy to see if it's got value for your organization. As Tyler mentioned, we make POCs available for our customers. And what that looks like is making 1 to 3 AWS accounts available to us for about 14 days. And around about the 15th day, we'll schedule a 45-minute webinar where we can highlight, using your actual AWS data, security exposures, underutilized AWS services, areas where you can save money, along with a handful of other corrective actions. We're going to be reaching out after this session. Just if you have any questions, I'm going to give you my email address as well. It's dthomson@conres.com. And Rachel, if any other questions come in?
No, that was it.
Perfect. Everyone, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for giving it to us. Have a great day.